This meeting is being recorded.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the pod. This week, I'm wearing dress clothes because I'm going to an event after this. And you know what? I just don't have time to change. But we're going to start off a little bit different, maybe a little bit more fun tonight. I wanted to ask Coach a question, skip a question. I was watching a game today, and the team, Texas Tech, is down to Texas. They've lost 2 out of 3 in the series. A guy hits a home run, and he jogs slowly around the bases. It made me just my skin crawl. Would you beam that guy?
First of all, I want to ask you, so what made your skin crawl? Why was it?
It just seems so out of context, right? You're down by 4 runs. You've just hit a solo shot and you're leading the Big 12 in home runs and you jog slowly around the bases. You're at Texas. It's a packed house. What are you doing? Like I'm beaming you next time you come up to the plate, right? Like I'm hitting that dude. That's just me though. I wanted to hear what you might do.
Did he have another at bat?
He still has 3 innings. Yeah, it's the 6th.
We may have to pause and tune in and just see how it's handled. Yeah. What's funny about that, buddy? Things have changed. And I've changed too, but I'm with you. That would get me a little bit, but you know what? It's one of those deals. I call it I took it upon myself to police assholes, you know, and it brought me a lot of problems in my life. And then I realized one day maybe I'm not the asshole police. You know what I mean? And then I had a buddy say to me one time, he said, and this was so wise, but we were talking about this very thing. And his name was Donnie Anderson. I don't know if you knew Donnie. You met him, but you might not remember. You would have met him up in Canada when you came and visited. He was he was one of my favorite. He was a teammate and everything, but he was like my idol, man, because he was one of the first guys to go down and play in the U.S. and all that. And so, but anyway, he's on my a few of our staffs, and as an assistant coach. But he was sitting there, and the conversation got started on this very topic: would you beat him? What's right? What's wrong? We went around and around. It was me and the GM actually having this discussion.
I remember the GM. I met him for sure.
Yeah, and he had a problem with some of my ways, and some of the renegade pirate, we call them. People used to accuse me of being a former pirate and a outlaw. You know what I mean? A lot of guys that do tune into this will laugh because they witnessed some of these things, but it was never I was never big on starting stuff. So to me, that guy, he started something by doing that. So then the problem is, what do? Do you defend, because that sends a message like your whole team's watching you? And I used to struggle with this. So do I just let it go? And then I got 25 guys with me that it's bothering, probably 20 of those 25, if not all of them. But so then what do you do as a leader? And so we went around and around about all the dynamics of that, because it was more of what that message sends. So you and I can go back to this another time because it is a fun topic. But my buddy said, after I said this and the GM said some things, Donnie turns around and says, "What if we're all wrong?" And I thought, wow, because it's unwritten what to do, right?
Yeah,
like the
that's what makes the game
NCAA.
so beautiful, right? It's a very rare part of sport.
Absolutely. And then if you do something, there's going to be suspensions. So was it worth it? Because it's unwritten. And then how do you camouflage it that you're not doing it? Because there's ways to do that where you can say, I said to a guy one time, "Hey, well," he said, "did you throw at my guy?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. You hit a couple of my guys." I said, "Did you throw at my guy?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, then I never threw at yours either, man." So
I love
there
it.
you go.
Yeah, and I think I'm kind of going to, like, it sounds like some of it's is it my job to police is kind of a waking up moment, right? Like asking a bigger question. But I think it's fun. Like I have a list of Scott stories in my head from the Bucks of things that you did in different situations. If we have time, sometime we're going to have to go down that road a little bit. But today we're talking about depression and how do you work through it, I think was our topic a little bit. And I don't know, Scott, maybe I'll have you go first. Is there anything that comes off the top of your head that you've done in the past when you've realized you're in that place of depression? And we've talked about this a little bit, being like a distorted emotion. Maybe you're feeling down or you're not feeling anything. Maybe you're having a hard time with motivation and energy. What have you done maybe in the past that's been helpful?
Well, my buddy, mine was such a long, lingering situation. Like, man, it was just something that, and what I mean by that is it came in like it would be very subtle and like low tide, and then there'd be times in my life where for whatever reason it was high tide, man. And I think that's self-explanatory. And I noticed the cycles in Trinidad where they were big, and I really wanted to get to the root of this because I had just, well, because of my job and because I became a father, and here I've got, and I just didn't want this for my children, and I wanted to be better for my wife and my boys, that's really what it was. And what I noticed though was, and I was in Trinidad, so I noticed that when the season started, it was more, I would settle in. Once we got going, it was more anxiety. We'll talk about the differences some a little bit again today and some of the similarities, but the season I would settle in and go through the season, but get extremely tired. And this is reflecting back. I didn't understand this then, but and not, I mean, you took good care of yourself, but not, traveling and I look back, I think, man, there was so many, if I'd have known what I know now, and I guess that's why we're doing this, so we can share this with these guys that are in this right now. Go through the season, anxiety would start to subside somewhat, but in the summers, high tide depression. When all of a sudden I'm not coaching
You're not
and
focusing on something.
there's downtime,
Mm-hmm.
and this stuff would roll in, and it was like clockwork. Like I could expect it to come in, and it would come in, and it was sadness. Like it was always sadness, and so what did I do? Man, I didn't have the tools then, buddy, and so I really struggled. I didn't have to struggle as much as I did, and that's why we're doing this today.
Yeah.
So the changes I've made, that's what the cycle looked like. That's what the patterns, that was year after year. You could count on it. It happened. And I dreaded it sometimes, man. Like, but it would be, looking back, it might be a little less each summer. A little, looking back now, I think I could say that there was some improvement a little bit, but the things that I tell guys, tools for me, if I'm hearing you correctly, and what works for me and has worked for me, because that's gone. I have none of that exists, which is amazing to me. But man, the things I really wanted to hit on, buddy, today were how big the things you can take care of. You hit on these last week. Diet is huge, man. I didn't realize that so much. Guys need to look in. You handed me an article, buddy, when we coached together at CCU. I remember where we were. We were over at Valor Christian, man. And you brought this article and said, hey, dude, read this. Because you and I had been talking about, and I barely knew you, but you and I had been talking about these types of things. And I was struggling then. Looking, some of this just moved, dealing with depression and anxiety at the time too. That stuff was raring, and leaky gut syndrome was the article. And so guys need to find out about leaky gut syndrome and how that influences us and our bodies and our chemicals and all those things. But diet, and the other one, Jocko, physical exercise, man. If you are not exercising, and I notice this with guys, I've seen some of these guys, and I'd like to tease them. Some of these dudes are pretty young. They got fat, man. And I'd like to single them out right here because I know some of them will be listening to this, but I won't. But they're not taking care of themselves. They're eating like they were 18. They have the same habits as they were 18, and taking care of themselves like they were 18. Problem is, things have changed. And so those two things alone, there's a lot more. And I want you, I'm not, I want you to touch on some of the other things too. But those two things, they're not, there's more.
Yeah,
But
and I'll build off of that, and I'm going to stay with what you're saying. So when I think about diet, right, like there's just so much good information on that. So you can do your own research. And I think a thing that I would say there is there's now some natural supplements that are really good for depression. Two, I'm going to point out are St. John's wort. There's some really good studies of the efficacy, but the newest one is called ashwagandha. It's Indian ginseng, and I have two current patients on that, and it's been really helpful. So these are things that are inexpensive that you can get at any grocery store. If you're somebody that's maybe not interested in medication, this could be something to start with. And then back to your physical health, you're right. Our metabolism slows down. We can't eat the same way that we used to. But I also think guys probably don't get physicals, right? So when I meet with somebody, the first thing I ask them is, who is your primary care physician, right? And, you know, maybe you're into doctors, maybe you're not. And so, but my main thing is just getting, you know, a blood screen, something to make sure that, especially with men, testosterone is a huge deal and it decreases as you get older. And so men's health is a big thing that I'm really excited about. And getting your T level checked. And also know that T level is different for all dudes, right? I have a special forces guy that I work with right now, and he has to have a very high level for his job. He's 36, but he needs a very high level, right? And so getting with a physician that knows a lot about testosterone, your hormones, those sort of things is something I'd recommend.
Jocko, you said some things. So ashwagandha, buddy, I take it. I can't tell you if it's working or it's not working, but I'll tell you this, it very well could be. So you talk about placebo effect, whatever.
Yeah, we're on the same page, man. If it's a placebo, who cares?
Yes, if it's sugar pill, hey, take it, man.
Take it. Yes.
But when I did this study in Jocko, this is a whole different, well, that's the same topic. But anyway, a few years back, what things led me into this, and we'll get into those stories later, because it was a key time for all of this. But I did a lot of research on the stuff you're talking about. I really dug in. And the reason I dug in, buddy, is I turned to the medical people, and they could not help me. And that is very hopeless, man. All they wanted to do was slide, serotonin stuff across the table to me, and I'm not down on that. So, and I hope, I'd rather you touch on that. There is a time and a place, man. There is, but to be on that for the rest of your life, man, I have red flags that pop up. It might just be me. So that's all they wanted to do. And so I did my own research. And man, the stuff I came up with, Jocko, that like magnesium, but it's a personal thing. That's why, like, can you say get a blood test? Man, now the things I'm taking, magnesium, ashwagandha, turmeric, because of digestive.
I take that every day.
You talked about it last week, buddy. The digestive thing, or 2 weeks ago, the digestive part of this, which goes with diet, but leaky gut syndrome, when you clean up your gut, it's amazing how much better you feel. And then when and then factor in, hey, we talk about exercise. These guys, when they're 18, so they want to head to the gym and get bench pressing. And I laugh. I'm like, well, you don't even need to don't start there. Take your fat ass and your fat dog's ass, because you got a fat pet that's with you, and go for a walk, man. Right?
That's right.
Get out. Just start there.
Get some steps. Yeah.
Get out. Absolutely, get out there and move. And it's amazing when you do those things, how much stuff changes. I'm not saying it's just there, because my sadness, I had to dig through there to get to where I was going. There was a route, but things got worse. And I think more anxiety too. Like you and I talked last week, depression linked to the past, a lot of times anxiety linked to the future. And so, like, a fear of the future, and then some resentments of the past, and I know there's some similarities there, but for me, I can really, it helps me to be able to divide them, to deal with them. And man, just the changes when I made the exercise and the diet investigations. Testosterone, when you said that, buddy, I was writing it down as you were saying it. I went and got checked and I was low. And so they, now you want to do your homework there because they'll ask you, do you want a shot in the ass? Do you want to use the creams?
Pellets
And
in
so,
your ass too. You can
yeah.
use pellets in your ass. That's some hardcore shit, man.
Yes.
I've got a couple of dudes that do that, man. That's intense, but it works really well.
It was a horse needle, buddy. It freaking brought my feet. I took the shot because I did do the cream one time, and it's just not. I don't know. There's just because it affects other people. Like, no one can touch that. So do your homework on it. Is all I'm saying is because there's differences of, but go get tested and ask because I told my brother about this and he had been struggling with some other things and he went in and they will not test it if you don't ask for it. So you have to ask for it because they tested everything. And so I asked them and it's ignorance on my part, but they said, well, we don't test for testosterone. I said, well, I want the test. And so I had to go back and sure enough, I was low.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll just add a couple other vitamins that I take. I take a high dose of vitamin D, vitamin B, vitamin C, turmeric, zinc are in my regular routine. And I think those can be game changers. They've tied vitamin D and vitamin B to mood, zinc as well. So these can be things that you do and take on a regular that can really boost mood. A couple of other things that I would just throw in here. I think meditation is a great tool. And maybe you start with an app, but even something as simple as deep breathing, right? And the way I do this, you guys will hear me talk about this, but I do it in the shower because I don't want to add anything to my life. I want to pair it with something. So my body knows the second I go in the shower, I start breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth. I usually do about 5 to 10 minutes. And I do it every day. And so your brain will start to realize when it's either depressed or anxious. It's like training for a marathon. If you just do it in the moment, your brain's going to be like, I don't know what the fuck you're trying to do. But if you've trained your brain over time to do this, your brain will immediately go into a meditative state because it recognizes what you're trying to do to it. Oh, it's time to go in from my sympathetic nervous system to my parasympathetic nervous system and calm down that reptilian brain that we call flipping our lid. When we go into fight, flight, or freeze, what happens is our lid gets flipped and we start to really have a lizard response, right? But if you've got a deep breathing practice, your brain can easily slip back into a nice restful state. Not always, right? There's going to be some things that are triggering, but if you have a practice, that can be really helpful.
And I think what guys don't realize, buddy, is that there's such a woo-woo taboo with that word, and it's becoming less and less, but people don't understand that even some of our religious guys in here, praying is meditating. You know what I mean? And it's a form of it. And so, like for me, I'll be walking in the mountains with my dog. We go up a couple times a week. Well, I can do this while I'm walking, and I do the same as you. And sometimes I like to sit, but I meditate better out in nature because it works quicker for me to where. And what am I doing? Slowing the mind down, actually trying to quiet it to where I can have no thought, and we're going this way. So guys realize, okay, so what is, because what you said, I totally get, man. There's some guys I know they're probably wondering, well, how do I, and you said it, meditation is breathing, man, slowing things down, getting things centered. And we're going to get to talking about this stuff because it's so big down the line, unconscious mind versus conscious mind. And what is that? And how does that tie in this? Because it's all tied together. This stuff is all like entangled in a good way. And I think our way, like we're just going to use depression and anxiety as a doorway to go into all this because it's going to bring up everything. We'll talk about the matrix and things like that, because it's all connected. And so I'm with you, man. Meditation, slowing the breathing down. Some guys will be like, they've never even become aware enough to listen to how they think, like who's doing the thinking and man, that has a lot to do with depression and anxiety.
Yeah. No, I hear you there. And I'm noticing we're almost out of time today. I know our time flies because we're having fun. But I'm just going to mention a couple of other things, and then I might do something a little bit fun here. So a couple of other things for you all to think about is sleep. Sleep is a super important part of depression and anxiety. If you're not sleeping well, you're going to be more depressed and anxious. If you're more depressed and anxious, it's often going to mess with your sleep. So sleep hygiene is something we can talk about on a future podcast, but that's super important. Also, the role of therapy. Maybe you're somebody who wants to talk to a counselor, right? What is counseling really? It's just a guided conversation, right? And sometimes we have things like trauma or existential questions about life, the meaning of life. Those can come up, and a therapist can be a great person to work with. It's something that's changed my life. It's been really, really helpful. Other things that you can use, music. Music is a really good way to use a different part of your brain. Your right side of your brain is aligned to music. That can be a great tool to manage depression. And then other kind of alternatives, getting a massage, body work can be helpful. Acupuncture can be helpful. I'm somebody that does acupuncture, and it's really painful. But I love it. It's something, and more insurance companies are covering both massage and acupuncture. Self-help books can be great for you and me, Scott. I think we've had some key books that have really helped us in both just kind of making sense of our lives. And then finally, connection, right? Men often struggle with connecting, right? If you can get people in your life that you can talk to on the regular, you don't always have to talk about deep things, but making sure you're not isolating. There's a lot of evidence that loneliness and depression are linked together. But I did want to ask Scott, I don't know, we had a fun conversation preparing for this episode. Maybe we go back to either the baseball question of but I kind of want a story from you before we wrap up today. Is there one on your mind that we could share with the guys that might be good?
What do you want it to relate it to, buddy? What would be a good?
How about one thing that we talk about is kind of the hijinks that have gone on that maybe the guys don't know about. I see a side of you that I don't think everybody knows is a bit of a prankster. We call it maybe the Joker, or so I'm wondering if there's a story that you could share that maybe would surprise the guys of some of the pranks you pulled over the years.
Man, you know what? You say that, and after we get off here, I'll think of about 20 that I should tell you.
Okay.
The first one that came to my mind, so I'll share this one, man. And it was funny, but I think I was a senior year. Everyone fell asleep. We're on the way somewhere. Everybody's sleeping on the bus. Not just like the only guys awake are the bus driver and myself. And I'm sitting in the far back, and I'm talking to everybody. Like there was not one guy awake. I connected every single guy, including the head coach. I don't know how sick of a mind I must have to want to do this, but I crawled under seats, over seats. The guys might have woke up a little to see what I was doing, but they thought I was just probably going up to the front for some reason or back to the back. But I ended up in it, and I had so all bags. Some guys went through their belt loop on their jeans, under a chair, through a bag, and I tied the head coach's shoe. That was the last piece, and I had to do it from under his seat. And the last piece was tying his shoe, and I tied his shoe to the side of like one of the braces of the bus seats. And I got it. I accomplished it because this thing went all, and I laughed. I sat there. I laugh now because how goofy I was, but I sat there and waited for the first movement, and it was that one of the coach at the front went to move his foot, couldn't move it. I saw him look down, I'm going to laugh now. And then I saw him, and he kind of he didn't cuss or swear, but you knew he was thinking like, chingao, what the, And then he looked back at me, like he knew. He looked back at me back there. But to watch guys wake up and try to move, stuck to their bag, stuck to their buddy across the aisle, one guy up through the top, so I was pretty proud of that.
Awesome. I love it. Thanks for that story.
You
awesome. And I know one other thing that I'm going to bring up, thanks for that story, is I think we've had some interest from players to possibly come join us and talk a little bit. Scott, maybe give some details on what we're thinking there.
Oh, quickly. What was neat, it was all on feedback. So one guy was a former pro guy that got up pretty high. He's going to join us because he talked about transitioning, how hard it was to transition back into life, not no longer a baseball player. And the reason I think is neat is he got to play a little longer, so it was probably even harder. But he wanted us to talk about that, how that's even affected his marriage. So I said, "Hey, would you join us?" He said he would. Another player who's coaching now, um, it tells me how much he struggles with anxiety, just,
Mm.
fear of the unknown, fear of the future, which is kind of how I define it. He said he's willing to join us. And so there's been a few guys like that I've asked them, and they're going to come on. And I think that would be neat, just to have another guy with us telling his teammates and peers, "Hey man, this is how it looks to me and how it feels to me." And we can talk about different ways to deal with that.
Awesome. Awesome. Very cool. Well, we're going to end for today, but I think next time we're going to try to touch on anxiety a little bit, maybe how it's different from depression. And if we have time, we'll get into some ways that you can work with anxiety as well. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us today.